San Francisco. 1964. The air inside the training hall is still, carrying only the faint echo of movement from the streets outside. Polished wood floors stretch beneath high industrial windows. Light filters through in diagonal bars. The space is clean. Functional. Empty, except for purpose. In the corner, a man stands alone. He's not tall, but something about the way he holds himself makes the room feel smaller. His movements are deliberate. Calm. He doesn't warm up like someone preparing to prove something. He simply moves through form as if testing water temperature. His name doesn't matter yet. To the people outside, he's just another instructor. Another voice in a city full of traditions. But traditions are about to collide. Across town, word has spread through the old Chinatown networks. A young teacher has been opening his doors. Accepting students who don't carry the right bloodlines. Sharing techniques passed down through generations with anyone willing to learn. To some, this is progress. To others, it's betrayal. One man takes it personally. A fighter from the old school. Respected in the circles that matter. Trained under masters who kept knowledge sacred. Protected. He decides a lesson needs to be taught. He arrives with a small group. No announcement. No formalities. Just the sound of the door opening and footsteps crossing the threshold. The atmosphere shifts immediately. Not with aggression, but with something heavier. Certainty. The fighter is methodical in his carriage. Composed. He carries the weight of tradition like armor. Every stance he's learned, every principle drilled into muscle memory, every hour spent perfecting classical form, he believes these things make him untouchable. The instructor turns. No surprise registers on his face. He's been expecting this. Not this person specifically, but this moment. This confrontation. It was inevitable the moment he decided his knowledge belonged to more than the chosen few. Words are exchanged. Brief. Formal. The fighter explains his objection. The instructor doesn't argue. Doesn't defend. He simply listens, and when silence follows, he offers a single option: if you want to stop me, you'll have to prove I'm wrong. The challenge is accepted without hesitation. But there's no audience here. No ritual. No referee to signal the beginning. Both men simply step into the open space and assume their positions. The fighter settles into a classical stance. Rooted. Structured. Every angle deliberate. He's a textbook. Every movement pre-written. The instructor stands differently. Lighter. Less defined. Like someone waiting to respond to a question not yet asked. The fighter moves first. A test. A probe. His technique is clean, precise, exactly as it was taught. But it meets nothing. The instructor isn't where he was a moment ago. He shifted, just enough to make the strike pass through empty air. The fighter resets. Tries again. A combination this time. High, then low. Each strike technically perfect. Each one anticipated and avoided with minimal effort. Frustration begins to creep in. Not visible on the fighter's face, but present in the rhythm. He accelerates. Commits more force. More intention. But the instructor remains calm. Untouched. Moving in ways that don't match any manual. Not retreating, exactly, but flowing around the attacks like they're obstacles in a stream. The fighter has spent years learning to be a mountain. The instructor has learned to be water. The fight stretches longer than the fighter expected. Longer than anyone expected. The classical techniques, polished over decades, keep landing on nothing. The instructor doesn't counter with flashy displays. No dramatic reversals. He simply waits. Observes. Tests. He's not trying to humiliate. He's trying to understand. Each exchange is data. Each movement reveals something about rigidity versus adaptation. Then it ends. Not with a knockout. Not with anything cinematic. The instructor finds the opening that was always there and moves through it. The fighter is on the ground before he understands what happened. Not hurt. Just grounded. Submitted. The certainty he carried through the door is gone. In its place, confusion. How does someone trained in perfection lose to someone who breaks every rule? The instructor doesn't celebrate. Doesn't gloat. He extends a hand. Helps the fighter to his feet. And then he explains. Not as a victor addressing the defeated, but as someone who just learned something valuable himself. He talks about the difference between knowing 1,000 techniques and understanding one principle. The fighter's training made him precise. Disciplined. Undeniably skilled. But it also made him predictable. Every stance has a counter. Every pattern has a flaw. The instructor's approach was different. No fixed form. No commitment to how things should be done. Just response. Adaptation. The opponent throws a punch, water moves around it. The opponent creates an opening, water fills it. He references an old idea. Be like water. Water doesn't fight. Doesn't resist. It finds the path of least resistance and follows it. You pour it into a cup, it becomes the cup. A bottle, it becomes the bottle. It has no shape of its own, so it can take any shape required. In combat, this means abandoning the need to be right. To prove your style is superior. To force your technique onto someone else's rhythm. Instead, you listen. Feel. Respond. The fighter absorbs this slowly. His entire identity was built on the opposite philosophy. Strength through structure. Power through tradition. To accept what he's hearing means acknowledging that his foundation might be incomplete. But he can't deny what just happened. He came here with certainty and left with questions. The instructor continues. He talks about how most fighters train to impose their will. To make the opponent fight on their terms. But in a real encounter, that creates friction. Resistance. Wasted energy. The goal isn't to overpower. It's to harmonize. To become so adaptive that the opponent is essentially fighting themselves. Their aggression becomes your tool. Their rigidity becomes your opportunity. He admits something else. The fight took too long. Against someone who trained in the classical methods, someone predictable, the encounter should have been over in seconds. But it wasn't. The fighter's conditioning and determination made him dangerous even when outmatched philosophically. The instructor realizes his own approach, while effective, still carries inefficiencies. Too much influence from the forms he learned as a young man. Too much leftover structure. He needs to evolve further. Strip away even more. Get closer to that formless ideal. The small group that came with the fighter stands silent. They expected a different outcome. A reassertion of the old ways. Instead, they witnessed something that doesn't fit neatly into their understanding of martial arts. One of them asks, if you have no form, how do you train? How do you teach? The instructor smiles slightly. You train to forget what you were taught. Not because it's wrong, but because clinging to it makes you brittle. You teach principles, not patterns. You help students find their own expression instead of cloning yours. The moment you create a system, you create limitations. The moment you name a style, you trap yourself inside it. True freedom comes from refusing to be defined. The fighter, still processing, asks what he should do now. Return to his school and pretend this didn't happen? Abandon everything he knows? The instructor shakes his head. You don't abandon anything. You transcend it. Take what's useful. Discard what weighs you down. Classical training built your foundation. It gave you discipline, awareness, technique. Now build on it. Stop defending the method and start exploring what works. For you. Not for your teacher, or your lineage, or your tradition. For you. The fighter nods. Slowly. It's not acceptance, not yet, but it's the beginning of something. A crack in the armor. Before he leaves, he bows. Not in defeat, but in respect. He came to close a door and instead found a window. After they're gone, the instructor stands alone again in the quiet hall. The fight is over, but the work isn't. He makes a decision in that moment. Whatever path he's been walking, it needs to go further. Faster. More direct. He begins to envision something that doesn't exist yet. A philosophy without borders. A method without rigidity. Not another martial art to add to the collection. Something that dissolves the very idea of collection. He will call it the way of the intercepting fist. A path built on interception, not reaction. On absorption, not collision. He will spend the rest of his life refining it, testing it, teaching it to anyone willing to abandon their need for certainty. And years later, when people ask what style he practices, he will say, none. And all. Because the style is no style. The form is formlessness. But all of that begins here. In this quiet moment after a fight that neither man expected to change them. The fighter walks away questioning everything he knew. The instructor walks forward questioning everything he thought he'd become. Both men are different now. One learned that mastery is not the end. The other learned that starting over is not surrender. And somewhere in that exchange, in the space between rigidity and flow, between tradition and evolution, a principle is born that will outlive them both. It's not about being the strongest. Or the fastest. Or the most technically perfect. It's about being impossible to predict. Impossible to contain. About becoming so fluid that force has nothing to grip. So adaptable that strategy has no target. About understanding that the fight is not won by the person with the most answers, but by the person asking better questions. The hall is silent again. Dust floats through the bars of light. The wood floor holds no evidence of what just occurred. But the air feels different. Charged with something unspoken. The old fighter will return to his students and teach them what he's always taught. But occasionally, in quiet moments, he'll pause. Adjust his stance. Allow a little more flow. A little less certainty. He won't call it a new philosophy. He'll barely admit it's a change. But it's there. And the young instructor, still standing in the empty space, has already moved on to the next question. If this works against tradition, how does it work against innovation? If this works against a single opponent, how does it work against chaos? If this works in a controlled environment, how does it work in the street? He doesn't have the answers yet. But he knows where to look. In the spaces between techniques. In the moments of transition. In the willingness to let go of what worked yesterday in search of what works now. That's where the truth lives. Not in the forms passed down through centuries. But in the choice to remain forever formless. The champion picked a random fighter that day. He didn't know it was the beginning of a legend. Neither of them did. But the water knew.